Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. With the Miami Grand Prix just around the corner, helmet Marko of Red Bull believes the only driver that can possibly match Verstappen and Leclerc this season is none other than Lando Norris in the McLaren. But right now his car just is not quite good enough to get to that point. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, 28 years ago on this day that the entire world of course lost the legend that is Ayrton Senna. What a driver, what a career, what an idol to so many. May the 1st and really the 30th of April as well with Roland Ratzenberger yesterday. Definitely, it's always a sore couple of days in the Formula 1 world, there's no doubt. Let's talk about Miami, though, because this I thought was kind of crazy. The water in this kind of artificial marina. Like, I saw this image yesterday, and I wasn't kind of sure what it's looked like from above. But as you can tell, this water is not real water, it's just fake water. They've put this kind of, like, flooring down, effectively. Like, I'm not really sure what they're thinking here, but I'm pretty sure this is right next to the track, as this image, you can see the track goes round, and they're making an artificial marina where, there's actually no water at all. So, kind of strange situation. It's, I guess, Miami doing what Miami does. But, yeah, definitely an interesting one. It's not even like, I don't know, if you think this looks anywhere near real, maybe from the sky it looks kind of real, but I'm not sure that at close range it gives any off a particularly good illusion. Not really sure who makes, fake water tiling on the floor either. But speaking of the Miami Grand Prix, there has been some talk whether the track is any good. Like, well, as Gasly says, actually, it's been in the simulator. I've tried it. I must say it looks pretty awesome. I really liked the layout. Quite a lot of high-speed corners, I guess this is. Quite challenging, unusual type of corners. Maybe it does mean content. Extremely long corners, very long straights. So, yeah, there's definitely a very long straight down the back. Certainly there's some other ones as well, but he seems to rather like the layout and also says it looks pretty good. That's the thing, is some people and drivers have said it looks pretty good. Whether it actually drives very well or races very well, that's another question. But of course, we haven't seen this track before. I think looking at it from above, it looks promising, but with these new cars, it gives it a little bit more leeway. But look, we'll see how it goes. I think it seems relatively challenging, as Gasly is saying. I think we should have some pretty good American entertainment, good entertainment the whole weekend. So very excited about it. The location is unique. Super, very hyped indeed. All that good stuff about the weekends. Now, there was also some rumours what was going to happen to the race directorship this weekend. Was Michael Massey going to make the phenomenal return? Because Wittich and Freitas both, I believe, tested positive. Now, I believe he's actually okay, Niels Wittich, so he's going to be the race director this weekend, and Massey doesn't have to make the return. It at least seems for the present day. So that kind of situation has apparently been resolved. And let's dive into McLaren then. So Andrea Seidel actually of McLaren did kind of mention a few words here about the Ferrari-Haas combination, because a lot of teams right now, Ferrari-Haas, they've kind of had a partnership going on there. Mercedes and, Williams, I guess, to a degree. Also Red Bull Alpha Tauri, like these kind of top dogs generally have effectively a B team that they're supplying with a lot of parts, and Haas obviously gets a lot from Ferrari, and the cars, as you can see, do look rather similar this year, and a lot of teams, including McLaren and Mercedes, at least rumoured to be right now, were effectively saying to, the FIA, like, okay, could you look into the relationship between Ferrari and Haas to make sure there's no foul play, in that there's no kind of actual sharing of kind of insight into the design of the car, which of course they're not allowed to do. They can only share a certain amount of parts, which the Haas and Ferrari relationship absolutely maximizes to its limits. They also kind of share some infrastructure, right? And despite the fact that Haas have said that like no one has the keys to the other team's kind of departments, effectively, like there's still that possibility that it's very difficult to police this stuff, right? So that's kind of what Seidel has said, that he's hoping that it never gets to a point where a team kind of has to have a B team in effect in order to gain some advantage. Because as he says, I'm less kind of concerned really about how the B teams are taking advantage, but I'm more concerned about how the A team is benefiting from this potentially, right? Like the B team could find some things out, like feed some information back to the A team, and then things kind of go from there, right? So that's definitely a concern. I hope that F1 never ends up in a position that you need to have a second team in order to fight at the front. He insisted McLaren's position wasn't influenced by Haas's current form. It's just a matter of principle where Formula 1, the FIA, the teams need to decide what F1 should be in the future. And again, our position hasn't changed and has nothing to do with the current sporting performance of teams, which of course is very good to say, but maybe this conversation wouldn't be being had to such a degree if Haas hadn't gone from right to the back of the field to all of a sudden a relatively competitive car this time around. Speaking of competitive cars, right at the front of the field, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, that certainly seems like it's going to be the championship battle this year. Mercedes are way off the pace. Pretty much every other team is way off the pace as well, but there has of course been one team that's very quickly been closing the gap on the competition, that being the McLaren. We'll dive into here in a second, and Helmut Marko has made his thoughts known on the strength of the drivers, right? Because of course that is a discussion. Like there's been some talk from him about, okay, should Hamilton just have retired at the end of last year? Of course Horner was like, look, he's not like he's forgotten how to drive and can certainly make a comeback, but only if the car's actually any good. But Helmut Marko, kind of chief advisor to Red Bull, puts in his thought on the third driver, that if there's going to be anyone in consideration, it's going to be none other than Lando Norris, as he described right here. He believes the championship will be decided between Verstappen and Leclerc, but the only talented driver that I see in this league is Lando Norris, but I believe he doesn't have the best machinery at the moment. So basically saying, look, Verstappen and Leclerc, they're number one, number two most talented drivers on the grid. The only one even close to them effectively that's kind of in the same league as those guys is Lando, and in fairness, he's got an awful lot of that McLaren so far this year. Yes, Riccardo's been, you could argue, somewhat unlucky, and of course he did slam into Sainz at the most recent event, which kind of cost him, I think it was a bit of damage that cost him moving up the grid as he would have liked to have done. But, still, the McLaren looks relatively good, but Norris certainly getting the best out of it, right? Like, kind of the back-to-back podiums, I think maybe 3 in a row, actually, podiums in Italy. The Italian Grand Prix of the last couple of seasons has worked out very well indeed for him. So credit where it's due on that front, and Helmut Marko seems to believe, I think even there's been some rumours that when Perez moves on, they'd love to put Norris in the seat beside Verstappen, which, I'm not really sure that's going to happen, but who knows, right? That'd be kind of a crazy driver pairing, Norris and Verstappen at Red Bull, but that's probably something that they would want to happen if they could make it happen, right? So maybe Marko's kind of buttering it up to a degree, but yeah, this is what he says. Kind of the translation in that quote tweet was probably a little bit better than this one here in the article, but the only pilot, the only driver that I see talented enough in that league is Lando Norris, but he doesn't have the best material machinery at the moment, right? So basically saying look, he reckons that it will be a Leclerc-Verstappen battle, but if anyone's going to get involved, it's going to be Lando Norris himself, right? And in fairness, it's kind of tough to choose right now what is the stronger car. Is it the Mercedes? Is it the McLaren? Because they've made great progress. If they can continue making strides, then McLaren might even be favourites for third in the constructors this year. Who knows, right? Because last year it was Mercedes, Red Bull at the front, then Ferrari versus McLaren for third, and then this year we could just have swapped effectively Ferrari and Mercedes, and it's actually a Mercedes McLaren battle for third place, right? And Helmut Marko seems to believe that the driver that's the most talented out of all those teams effectively is none other than Lando, and he's going to get the best out of that situation. He's of course had some words on Lewis Hamilton saying he should kind of retire. There was also some nice words that Helmut Marko mentioned, because it's not always he's always incredibly critical of Hamilton, but he did give him some credit for a sensational start back at the Australian Grand Prix. But if you look at the drivers' standings, Norris is actually already above Hamilton after that great last couple of races. Of course, Russell's here in P4. I'm also kind of interesting the fact that Marko doesn't even mention Perez, right? At the other guy on his team, he could at least have maybe thrown Perez in there, because we saw Toto Wolff yesterday was kind of saying, look, he reckons that Russell and Hamilton, 2 best drivers in the world. Outside of that, probably Verstappen, 3rd best, or in that ballpark. You'd have thought maybe if you work for the team, you're going to give your 2 guys the benefit of the doubt, and then say maybe the current world champion or 7-time world champion or whatever is going to be the other guy to round out the lot. But Helmut Marko disagrees. Perez not even in the conversation, which is maybe fair enough, right? But also kind of blunt and maybe not what you might expect people to say. And he's putting Norris in that conversation. In fairness, right? If you look at the top 10 right here, Norris is kind of the only McLaren driver getting anywhere close to the rest of the pack and doing an excellent job, of course, in that car so far. And of course, he's very surprised, right? Because after Bahrain, the shocking performance they had there, all the talk was, McLaren, they're terrible this year. What's happened to their car? It's looking abysmal. The power unit's terrible, but also the car itself has no downforce. The brake issues, all this type of stuff was happening. And, he didn't think he'd score a podium at all. That's exactly what's just happened most recently in Imola. Now, there's some really interesting statistics, actually, just looking at kind of the difference in race pace from the McLaren to the leaders, effectively. This was, of course, as we saw most recently in Imola. This is, I guess, Lando right here in the car. The Alfa was actually quicker, kind of interestingly, but this is in terms of pure race pace, slightly quicker than what Russell was doing here in the Mercedes, about a second down on Red Bull. But if we look at it from this perspective, there's a slightly different number here, actually, but a relatively similar one to what we saw. This is the difference in the midfield to the leaders in every race so far. So Mercedes and Alpine have been relatively consistent in terms of how far they are back. If anything, getting slightly worse than Mercedes, but arguably if George Russell, if his kind of all front wing had been adjusted to actually be set up for the dry, he might have been somewhat quicker than this. But still, there's 2 lines that kind of stand out rather a lot. One of which, of course, being the Alfa Romeo that was far back in Saudi Arabia, but since then has rocketed down to be relatively close to the leaders, at least in terms of pace. But also this massive papaya line of the McLaren, right? Almost 3 seconds a lap back on the pace of the leaders back in Bahrain to 2 seconds a lap back in Saudi Arabia, 1.5 seconds back in Australia, and now 1 second. So if you keep this kind of progression going, they're going to, seemingly on this pace, going to get very close to the leaders, right? And who knows, right? The McLaren, they're 4 races in. They've already dropped their gap to the leaders from basically 3 seconds down to 1. Of course, they get circuit dependent to a degree, but you could well see a continued progression here, right? If McLaren can continue their upgrades, they could get closer to the leaders than they already are. And if Helmut Marko's right in that Norris is kind of the guy, apart from Verstappen and Leclerc, that can actually put up a fight here, if his car all of a sudden becomes rather competitive, then they could seriously have a struggle on their hands. Always rather unlikely, but there's 19 races to go. There's DNFs to come. There's plenty that could happen this season, right? But it would be great, because I think a lot of people came into the season kind of hoping that we'd have at least a 3-way battle for the title. Hopefully Mercedes can get there soon, but if McLaren can get there, then that's better for everyone as well, I suppose, in terms of the excitement around the championship battle, or at least another driver in the mix would be nice at the very least. Speaking of drivers, this I thought was kind of interesting. Nick de Vries has apparently been linked with the Williams F1 seat for next season. He's obviously been killing it in the Formula E side right now for Mercedes, so the links there might make sense. He's had a statement on this and said, I have no idea where you read that or where you encountered them, but I'm very curious where they got that from, because honestly, I have no idea. So interesting statement. Tough to say whether he actually does know or whether he doesn't know, but yeah, he's denying any possibility that he's going to be in the Williams next year. But that kind of is the key rumour that Latifi's probably going to be out of there next season, because I don't believe they need need his kind of sponsorship money anymore, so there's some other possibilities on the horizon there for who's going to replace his seat. This also thought was kind of funny, really, just that typical George Russell in a way, struggles with Williams for many years, finally gets the chance at Mercedes, and now the car isn't particularly good. And basically says, like, I've been struggling with Williams challenges for all these years, like, it's kind of set me up rather nicely to deal with this pretty terrible car that we have right now at Mercedes and getting the best out of it, right? So thought it was kind of interesting statements, no doubt. This also just quickly on Alfa Romeo, of course, because we looked at that graph a second ago, that it's Alfa also making some huge improvements. Of course, we had some DNFs and stuff here in Saudi Arabia, but they were very close indeed to the leaders in terms of pure race pace. What Bottas, of course, was able to do, and they've said they've got some updates in the pipeline they're bringing to Barcelona. They say they're going to focus on themselves, but right now I'm pretty sure Alfa Romeo are like 5th in the Constructors' Championships, which is higher than they've been as kind of as an organisation, as a team, for a very long time. So impressive work, no doubt. And just to finish up with this as well, of course, the Miami Grand Prix coming up this weekend, the teams, all the kit, seems to be arriving in due course. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.